Wuhan, China, the epicenter of the outbreak. Now, 9 people have died in China. At least 470 there are infected. And there are fears the coronavirus will spread during the busy Lunar New Year travel period. Besides the US, cases have also been reported in South Korea, Japan, and in Thailand. The virus was first identified at a market in the city of Wuhan last month, which was selling seafood and live animals. CNN's David Culver joins us now from Wuhan. David, just talk to us from what you've seen as to how the Chinese government are now stepping up their response to this as the Lunar New Year is beginning.
Right, that's the biggest concern, Christina, is the time of year, right? This is when it's really the largest human migration each year. You got hundreds of millions of people traveling. We were among them in the crowds as we took the train from Beijing here to Wuhan last night, and we were able to get a feel for just the close quarters that people are traveling together. So that's the greatest concern. This is actually the first time we've been able to take off our face masks. I keep it close with me because we're at an elevated level, a balcony, secluded away from the big crowds. But as soon as we get to the streets, we and most people here put the mask back on. This was our opportunity to bring you to what is the epicenter of this illness. Behind the police tape, this normally crowded market in the central China city of Wuhan sits eerily desolate. This is ground zero for the illness sparking global unease. So this is where authorities believe the source of the coronavirus is. It's the wildlife and seafood market. And you can perhaps see over there, it's cordoned off. You've got police at all the corners. It is so sensitive that within minutes of us arriving and recording, security asked us to stop filming. There is an uneasiness felt throughout Wuhan. We experienced that as soon as we boarded the train from Beijing. Each car nearly full, most faces covered. Just about everyone traveling home for the Lunar New Year. Strict screening upon arrival. One by one, passengers step through a thermometer check to make sure they are not bringing a fever with them. Scenes like this playing out in transportation hubs across China.
The virus was being spread mainly through respiratory transmission and is likely to mutate, which will increase the risk of epidemics spreading. In addition, the Spring Festival travel rush saw a mass migration of people, and that has objectively increased the risk of epidemics spreading and the difficulties in taking effective preventative and control measures. We should always be on high alert and never take this lightly.
Behind me, this is one of a few hospitals here in the region that's dedicated to treating some of those who are either confirmed cases or suspected cases of the coronavirus. Out front, you've got a few staff members who we notice are all wearing masks. Some of them are even wearing protective gloves, just to prevent any potential exposure. It's brought the normally festive holiday mood in Wuhan to a halt, and it's cut down this vendor's business.
This year, the pneumonia situation is getting serious, so there are not so many people coming here to buy goods.
She's from a city that's about 2 hours drive from Wuhan. She's got her mask nearby, and she admits she's worried. And so too is her daughter and other relatives.
They were asking me to go back home, but I can't leave with all my inventory here. I've already bought these goods. I have no choice, and I have to stay here and resign myself to my fate.
Other vendors more hopeful. This woman telling me she does not feel the need to wear a mask.
Maybe I am having a positive outlook. I have been checking online instructions on Baidu, like drinking more water or washing your hands more frequently. I think that should be fine.
The unknowns looming over a city with a rising death toll. Unclear what's next for Wuhan and the 11 million people who call it home. 11 million people. That's probably the biggest takeaway from us coming here is getting a feel for just how this massive city is trying to cope with this growing uncertainty, Christina. It's also worth pointing out, this is a transportation hub, so they've got a lot of folks normally coming through here. They're starting to cancel some of the tourism buses to prevent some of that, but it's tough to just shut a city like this down. You've got folks coming in and out. It's also a college town, 89 universities, 1.2 million college students. They are currently on holiday, but as soon as the festival ends, they're supposed to be coming back here. There's a lot of uncertainty as to if that's actually going to be feasible, Christina.
Yeah, and David, as we begin to hear about the virus spreading internationally to neighboring and other countries, I wondered, given that you're in Wuhan, what are the people saying there about the government's response time to this? How are they feeling about how the outbreak has been handled thus far?
It's interesting to look at what we're seeing firsthand and comparing it to social media, because we are seeing similarities. So you have some who are genuinely concerned, they're frustrated with the lack of clarity, and then you have others who feel like they can fully trust the government here, and they don't need to wear masks because they feel like things are going to be taken care of, and eventually things will return to normal. But I got to tell you, the one woman who we introduced you to in that fruit market who is cutting her sugar cane, she breaks your heart. I mean, she is somebody who came here from a neighboring town, and she's trying to sell her products. We said, well, why don't you just go home? She said her family's pleading with her to go home. Her daughter was on the phone moments before we spoke with her, but she says, I can't just leave all my stock here and cut that financial loss and walk away from it. It's just not feasible. It's not possible.
Yeah, David, it's great to have your first-hand reporting there on the ground in Wuhan. Really appreciate you being up with us. Well, let's bring in our CNN chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, it's great to have you with us on this story because people are just trying to gauge how worried they should be about this. Just explain, if you will, what makes this virus so potentially dangerous.
Well, you know, we know that this virus is spreading, and that was expected. I mean, we live in an era of global travel and people flying in and out of Wuhan, which is a city of 11 million people. People may think of this as a smaller city. It's a very populated city. We also know that there is what's called an incubation period. And what that means is people contract the virus, and then there's a period of time that passes before they actually start to develop symptoms. So with this gentleman, for example, we know that he's in his 30s. We know he came to Seattle January 15th. It did not sound like he had any symptoms that time. By the 16th, he started to develop some illness. 3 days later, he goes in to seek medical care, and within a day, he's diagnosed. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the timeline, and that's important because he was able to get diagnosed very quickly. With the SARS outbreak 17 years ago, Christina, you didn't have, the technology wasn't there as quickly to be able to make these diagnoses. So I think in terms of concern, we don't know just how deadly this is. There could be many, many people out there infected, and there's been 9 deaths so far, so it could be a much lower mortality number than we mortality ratio than we expect, so that could be good, but we just don't know yet.
Yeah, let's hope so. Well, also yesterday, Sanjay, the head of China's National Health Commission said that there was a risk the virus could mutate. So, given what you've just said, how problematic could that be in containing the outbreak?
Well, the virus has mutated. I mean, you know, if you remember, this really came from probably from a market that sold seafood and exotic animals, and at some point this virus jumped from animals to humans, which is how almost all of the infectious diseases originate. This has happened throughout history with coronavirus, where it's made this jump. It's happened at least 7 times. 2 of the times ended up being SARS and MERS. What we now know is that it's spreading from human to human. So, you know, this is how it sort of started. This is how the prediction model was in terms of how it continued to spread.
And as of right now, do we know if there's a vaccine that is in existence to be able to contain this?
No, there isn't a vaccine. I mean, this timeline has just happened over the last month, Christina. So, I mean, it takes a long time to sort of develop a vaccine. They were able to sequence exactly what this virus is. That's been really helpful for screening, but vaccines can be challenging. You may remember, again, even with SARS, there never was a vaccine developed. SARS went away because it simply sort of fizzled out over several months, about 6 months. That's the